It's definitely a hallmark of the Toyota leadership is getting consensus, understanding each other's ideas and questions and concerns before implementation. Doesn't mean everybody agrees, but it means everybody understands the impact and they support what's going to happen. Now that I'm in the position I'm in now, I've seen a lot of things, been a lot of places. I'm reluctant to work with companies, leaders that aren't ready at the very top to embrace change. If they're kind of delegating any transformation efforts down to specialist level or manager level, my experience has been it's really tough for them to be long-term successful in that.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. I am your host, Keith Norris. Our guest today is Darril Wilburn. Darril is a senior partner at Hansha and a respected teacher, coach, and thought leader in lean leadership and the Toyota way. During his time at Toyota, Darril helped develop and implement some of Toyota Motor Manufacturing's most important leadership programs. He also worked at the Toyota Institute in Japan on the Toyota business practice, helping pilot and teach the thinking behind problem-solving leadership and continuous improvement. What makes Darril's perspective especially valuable is that he does not treat lean as a set of tools. He brings it back to leadership, learning, humility, courage, and Kaizen, the human side of building culture where people improve the work and improve themselves. Darril, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Keith. Good to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm super looking forward to this conversation. You definitely have got a very deep and interesting background and love to get at some of the stories that helped got you to this point. One of the questions that we always like to lead out with is the spark. Was there a particular moment that got you on this path to really dedicate your life to this? Do you remember when that journey started for you?
Yeah, it's kind of, I guess, somewhat interesting story. I never looked to get a job at Toyota. I was a high school teacher at one point, and then went back to the University of Kentucky and was in the Department of Continuous Quality Improvement. A friend of mine worked at Toyota and said, "Hey, we have a job that kind of is what you're doing. So why don't you apply for that?" So I was lucky enough to get chosen for that coaching role, leadership coaching role in Toyota, Kentucky. And it really, the spark for me was noticing the flow on the floor in the Toyota, Kentucky plant, being new to manufacturing and just really being enamored by what almost looked like an orchestra of everything coming together. And I was working on the people side at that point of trying to coach and develop people who were very good in their skill of problem solving and the Toyota production system tools, but maybe didn't have that other side, the people side of it. So my job was to kind of coach those people and bring them up so that they could be a higher level contributor. And it was seeing the floor side along with that people side that for me was the spark, and bringing those two together. And I've been dedicated since then, internally at Toyota and then externally now out in the world, in trying to bring those two, the people side and the floor side, together for everybody.
That's so interesting. So you started out as a teacher, as just an education school teacher. Was that did you have a college degree that took you down that path, or was
Yeah, I
it
had my education history degree. Got
okay?
my master's in instructional design, and then
Okay.
that was also helpful in Toyota,
Yeah, I
because
bet.
instructional design is like a problem solving. So Toyota is all about problem solving. So grasping the situation, developing countermeasures to the problem once you figure out the root cause, and so same kind of thinking way. And so that was very helpful for me.
That's so interesting. Yeah, that instructional design is definitely a path that I have seen some others follow. That's so interesting. So how long were you at Toyota?
I was at Toyota for 7 years.
7 years.
I tell many people that I consider myself the most lucky person that ever worked at Toyota. in those 7 years, I got a chance to work at Toyota Kentucky, which is the largest, Toyota plant in the world, and did some really cool projects there, including the coaching work, working on the Toyota Way 2001, which is the foundation of a lot of the material that I even work on today. And then also being a student of TPS at the OMDD, the Operations Management Development Division within Toyota, went to the Toyota North America after that, where I was working on a couple really cool projects, including the global pilot of the Toyota business practice. Got a chance to help design and deliver the global pilot for that program, which has its own history and a lot of other programs that came up at the same time. And then one of my projects there was the Texas startup, and I was going down and supporting the startup a week a month. And then they asked me to join the team in Texas, and I really loved the North American headquarters job because I could go and see all the plants, and I really like that. But the opportunity to be a part of a startup, to go from greenfield to a fully functioning plant, I couldn't turn it down. So I joined that team. There were 35 internal, 35 external people at the time. We had hired 35 people from the outside, and so we started this plant, and it was just incredible to be a part of that. So I crammed a lot of incredible experiences in that 7 years.
So you were setting up a new plant. What were they making at that plant?
They eventually made the Tacoma truck and the Tundra, and so
Interesting.
yeah, it was again greenfield all the way to production. And people would be shocked to know the degree of preparation and how long it took us, and when we started hiring people and training them. Most companies don't do that, so it was great to see that.
Yeah, that's one thing that I remember hearing from someone else who had worked at Toyota was the interview process to get hired on there. Tell us what that was like, maybe for you, and then what it became over time.
Yeah, I think it's still pretty much the same way. For example, in Texas, I think we had 2,000 jobs we were hiring for. I think 50,000 people were interested. And there's an initial kind of phone screening that it's an electronic phone screening that asks a few key questions. And some people kind of, just enter in a way
Yeah,
that wouldn't be a match, and so that
yeah.
gets out some. And then there's some other levels of screening, and then you finally get to the point where you're interviewing people. And at that point, probably hiring one out of every three people we interview. So for a startup, we rotated teams through the interview process, because it was, there were a team of three people interviewing,
That's just a
and
lot.
so I was on several of those panels to do that, and it was painstaking process, but we really wanted to be sure. It's difficult to be hired at Toyota, and it's difficult to be fired too. But we wanted to make sure we did that right.
I think those two things are probably more correlated than people might think initially. Like if you do a really good job of screening up front, you can expect hopefully to hold on to people on the back end. What would you say are some of like the, I don't know, attributes, psychographic personality? Like what are some of the things that they are looking for or makes somebody a good fit for a Toyota culture?
The biggest thing, Keith, is teamwork. Can they work together with other people? And so one of the pre-hire activities that a select few people get a chance to join in is a simulated day at work, and there's also some team activities. And so we noticed that a lot of people would come into that and they would think that what we were looking for is the take charge person.
Interesting.
But what we were looking for were people who could facilitate other people and work together and get multiple ideas so that could become a leader in that way, and not, the telling people what to do and taking charge of everything. So it maybe threw people a little bit, that's what we were looking for. But we had some other screening things to look for teamwork tendencies as well. But that's the biggest thing, that you can work as a team if you're really open to problem solving and going through a process to do that.
Yeah.
Then we want you if you can do that.
That's interesting. Yeah, teamwork. I've heard a lot of different methods for people to use in hiring process, and I've heard things like some version of like sample work. Hire somebody for a small project to do a thing. But it sounds like that you guys actually did something with a team of people. W-
Yeah.
Were they all recruits, or was it like some inside people
No,
that?
they had they had very standard work to be able to do. Part of that day at work was they were actually doing physical jobs, so they could understand
Yeah.
that a lot of the jobs are physical. We called them industrial athletes. So we wanted to make sure that they could actually do the physical part of the job. And then the last half of the day, they would be in teams working on projects, simulated projects, to see how they work together and communicated and that kind of thing.
I remember talking to a leader one time that said something along the lines of likes to hire athletes. And I think the
Right.
idea was like, I like to hire people that know how to play a team sport or something. And I
Yeah.
thought that that was kind of an interesting insight from him at the time. And, there it is kind of validated from Toyota verifying the teamwork thing. There's lots of different ways to develop that skill. That's so interesting. One of the things I find most interesting about Toyota, like you said, you didn't necessarily seek out Toyota necessarily because they're Toyota and you wanted to go there. It was just kind of an opportunity that happened. I think a lot of people have this perspective of like Toyota that's maybe different than what it's actually like inside. Have you come across that since you left? Like what people think Toyota's like versus what it's actually like?
Yeah. And Keith, there's 1,000 things that we could talk about that people perceive about Toyota and what is actually happening and what has happened over the years. Toyota, you know, fails every day. They're not perfect and they just keep on trying and they keep on getting better as a broad thing. People we look at Toyota as this global humongous organization that has been so successful and so profitable, and they're basically a bank at this point. They have so much money that they've put away so they can work on projects that they want to work on and not get have to go through approval. But they started it basically in a garage, as a family company, spun off from a loom company in Japan with just a handful of people, just like any startup would do. And over the years, they've built this culture. They've built the Toyota production system. They've built the Toyota management system, which is probably more important than the Toyota production system. And people just don't. They think they came fully formed based on what we can see today, but they struggled like everybody, and they were a small regional company in Japan, not this huge global company. So when you look at it from that perspective, and you start to understand that they weren't always what they are now, you can start to deconstruct that and say, oh wow, these things that they do today so well, they had to learn them, and they had to learn the hard way, and they tried 1,000 ways that didn't work, and they found the two ways that did work. So, but many, many, many things it's hard to imagine
Yeah,
all the
it's
different ways that people perceive it versus what it actually is.
well, and yourself and others, it does seem like there's a lot of information available and in the world about the way Toyota works. And I haven't ever heard of anybody saying, "Hey, as of you're not allowed to talk about that." All there's plenty of companies that are like that. Like you can't even mention, you can't say anything about what happened at your company. It seems like there's like an openness that exists there that I think is probably fairly unique in most businesses.
Yeah, and it's part of the learning too. But if you're not open, if you're not humble and open to learning, then you can't do the PDCA cycle of what happened, how can we fix it, how do we redo our standards to make sure it doesn't happen again. And so in that case, it's pretty open. And of course, Toyota. You can go tour Toyota in Texas and Kentucky. They let anybody come to see what they're doing. So very open in that aspect as well.
That's another thing I find is very interesting, and I think I don't recall exactly where I heard the story, but hey, Toyota does these tours and people can come see, and the story goes something like, well, somebody says, well, hey, aren't you concerned about letting people in to see exactly how you do it? And their answer was like, well, it's going to be different in the near future anyways. So what does it
Yeah.
matter if they see what we did, last week or 2 months ago? Is that how you experienced it as well?
Yeah, and they only see the surface level. They don't really. Most people don't look behind that, or the 3 or 4 levels of what made that Kaizen that they can see on the floor, or that process. They don't see the 1,000 layers of learning that happened before that. And when I was in Kentucky, actually, in the summertime, we would do a special session after the tour. So some companies would come and they would take the tour, and then some of them would sign up for like an extra Q&A session after the tour. And I did a few of those myself. And it's open questions, and people, maybe there's 10 people from, various companies that have just done the tour, and we would meet in a room, and introductions, and then they would just ask questions, and no one ever said to me, don't, if they ask this question, don't answer it. Said, just whatever they ask, just answer, and there could have been competitors in the room, but we never really cared. Now, I think it's changed a little bit these days. I think there's a little bit more scrutiny about who gets extra information in some of those sessions.
Yeah.
But at that point, we were, yeah, how do we do X, Y, Z? I'll tell you. I mean, because again, it would be difficult for them to do it when they got back to their place.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. What are some of the things you could take this in two different directions. Let's say, what are some of the things that people that maybe get inspired by Toyota and like, oh, we need to do this. Let's go follow Toyota, and they start with this checklist of things. What are some of the things that people tend to start with, and maybe what are the ones that are wise to start with, and then maybe what are the ones that are putting the cart before the horse, so to speak?
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of directions to take that kind of question. What I've noticed outside in the world, there's many reasons to be inspired by what Toyota does and how they do it. But the things that people see and they think are easy to do, or is something like a 5S technique, for example, right? And especially in Toyota Japan, it's a little different. I take people to Japan a couple times a year on tours. I just got back from one, and the 5S was a big topic while we were in Japan from some of the companies that I brought over, because of the way they see it as basically a housekeeping, you know, the, and in Toyota, we don't see it like that. We see it as making the work, making the environment that we're working in able to support a tack time and a cycle time within that tack time. So that mostly repetitive work is easy to do. And if you don't have all your stuff in the right place at the right area at the right time, you're not going to be able to complete your cycle in under tack time. But then people expand that idea, and it ends up being just a massive housekeeping project in the plant. And I'll give you an example of how people maybe misread that. So we were in a plant in Japan last couple weeks ago, and they were gracious enough to let us take video. And so there was a process. It was a stamping and welding process. And for the casual observer, those kind of really old plants that do that work are not spotless by any means. They're kind of dirty. This one in particular happened to be, for that kind of work, happened to be really clean. And the work design was amazing. I honestly get emotional sometimes seeing well-designed work, and this work was so well designed. And somebody sent a video back to their boss, and the response was, "No good 5S." And this place was very well designed, like I said, the work, including the 5S for the work that needed to be done. But the first thing the supervisor even of this person said, "Oh, the 5S is no good." Like, no, it's not clean because this workplace is not the cleanest work. But he couldn't see beyond that.
Same.
So I think that's one of the things people try to do in their place. They take a tool or a technique and they say, "Oh, I'm going to apply it." And they don't really understand it. They want to put the tape down. They want to clean everything up, which is good. That's a good value to have as a company, to keep things clean and tidy. But until you connect it to the work, it's going to fade away. Generally, it fades away. My experience has been, good 5S effort, and then 1 year later, you can barely tell that it was done. So I think that's an inspirational thing for people when they
Yeah.
see it, but then they go and try to implement, and it's not really understanding the purpose. And the thing that will be the sign that they don't understand is they start adding S's. Well, this is not. We need six
Extra
S.
S's.
Yeah, so let's have 6S. Let's add safety to it. We need 7S. How about smile? Okay, smile. That's good. Everybody. I've seen 9S before out in the world, and they don't even understand the first two. So
So interesting.
that's maybe one thing that we can look at and see what people try to do based on their inspiration of the surface level.
Yeah, I that takes me to another area of questions that I was thinking of is the idea of sometimes with continuous improvement, I think people feel like everything's open for improvement all the time. But the idea that you need to have standards, right? Like if 5S is the standard, then follow the standard. You mentioned with the interview process that people come in and they evaluate them for how well they're able to follow the standard. I know that's kind of a topic that sometimes people in this discipline can get a little bit in two minds about. Like, should I follow the standard or should I try to improve it? I don't know if you have any thoughts of wisdom of like how to be pulled between those two tensions.
Well, we could spend the rest of our hour and another hour on the idea of the paradoxes that drive Toyota and drive the Toyota way. Actually, I have a keynote that I've done on that topic.
Interesting.
And so one of the first paradoxes you notice is even in the house of TPS, and you could maybe more accurately call it a torii, like a gate. If you see in Japan, if you go into a shrine, there's a gate, a torii, and it's got two sides, like the pillars of the house that a lot of people show for TPS, and they have a connector at the top that holds this paradox open. And so the paradox is on one side of this house or this pillar is to flow, to just in time, to flow the work through. On the other side, it's stop. So it's jidoka. How do we build in quality, which means if we have an issue, we stop. Those two things are opposed to each other. But in a Toyota environment, especially in Japan and somewhat in the US as they try to export that thinking, they live with that normally. That's a normal part of the culture in Japan is having paradoxes that are open like that. And so, yes, it's a contradiction, it's a paradox. Stop it and flow it. And one of the executives I talked to recently said that our message to team members is to stop the line if needed.
If needed.
He said, our message to management is never stop the line.
Balancing the
The
tensions.
paradox.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. It's very yin and yang, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's in the keynote that I did last summer, it actually, the symbol I use for that is the Torii gate with the yin and yang in the middle of that to explain how those two things, those paradoxes happen and how they work. And
I,
it's one of the things that really tough for Western people, I think. We want to solve these paradoxes, these
yeah.
contradictions.
I love that thought. I have a little frame of mind that I think of sometimes where like tactical, keep the flow going, tactical, stop, right? But strategic thinking is this idea of keeping two things in mind that seem to be in conflict with each other and figuring out how to still move forward, not get paralyzed by that tension, that paradox, but to move forward. So maybe that's why I find this stuff so interesting is because
Yeah.
I like to find the
There's a
progress and the tension.
And there's a practical example of that too, just that everybody can see. So in the world right now, in the past 10 years, there's been a huge effort to move everything to EV, to electric vehicles, all the car companies. And a couple of US makers even said, okay, by this date, we're going to be fully EV. And they've had to backtrack on that now because, we're not
Yeah.
ready in the US
Yeah.
for full EV fleets. But Toyota never made that decision. They kept that paradox open. They, of course, have great internal combustion engines. They have great EVs, but they never pushed their chips in the middle of the table and said, we are going to be a full EV company by this date. And they continued to make their hybrid technology better and better. And so that was always been the connector. That's the connector between the EV and the internal combustion.
Yeah.
Maybe the two sides. And so they've continued to research and develop hybrid, not hybrid, but hydrogen power as well, because they want to keep these things open because eventually we will know the right path that to go on, and the right time. But pushing everything in for EVs early was not Toyota's thing, and they resisted it, and got a lot of criticism about that. Why are you continue to invest in these other things? Well, we want to keep all of our options open, and they can afford it. So
Yeah, and that sounds like a very intelligent and also well-resourced ability to do that kind of thing, right? Be diversified in your approach and
yeah, they've
yeah,
earned their way.
Yeah, why not have multiple irons in the fire, so to speak, if you can afford to do so? Yeah, I noticed. I try to remember what it was. Maybe one of the last Olympics or something, where I saw Toyota really presenting themselves as a mobility company, and saw all sorts of different mobility solutions. So it was interesting to get a little glimpse into how they at least want the world to think of them in their marketing. So, having worked inside of Toyota, I'm sure that, Toyota is probably better than most places, but I'm sure like everybody's job, there's good days and there's bad days. There's things that Toyota says they do, and then maybe sometimes they don't do it. What are some of the things that you feel like, I don't know, Toyota struggled, or maybe you did run into some of that tension? Some examples like that.
Yeah, I think that one of the struggles was translating the Toyota way into the West. And so it's a tendency, maybe for all people, I know for a lot of myself sometimes and other Western leaders, we want to kind of get an idea. Oh, yeah, of something. Yeah, I get it. I understand. I totally get it. And we saw that tendency because when you're creating a whole new plant in the West, when the Kentucky being the first solely owned plant, Canada being right after that for Toyota outside of in North America, you have to hire local people. So you're not going to hire these people who grew up in Japan. It's impossible. So you have to do your best to translate. So I think one of the things that really struggled with early on was translating the Toyota way to Western leaders, and they didn't always want to shed some of the way that they were taught to lead in companies they came from, and many of those were the Detroit Three companies and other companies, car companies, for example, other non-manufacturing companies, where they came in with this certain attitude or idea about what it means to be a leader. And so they might, you know, kick the trash can a time or two and yell at people, and that's not the Toyota way. And so trying to coach that out of them, I think, was a struggle for Toyota for a while. And I think they've gotten better at that over the years, and also maybe being able to relax a little bit and say, okay, there are a lot of positives about the Western style. How do we take advantage of those? And then how do we supplement that with the Toyota way?
It's interesting. Are there, you kind of mentioned an example of maybe a leader who's going to come and yell and scream, or you said kick the can. Are there some leadership mindsets that are Western or non Toyota that stand out, or that you've got some interesting stories about?
Yeah, and usually the initial issue is thinking they get it and then trying to move into their be comfortable in their role, and they use that some of their old style. And for example, building consensus and communication is very important in the Toyota culture. We had we had a very senior leader in the Kentucky plant, who early on in their tenure would kind of bypass the people in their chain of command, and they were pretty high. So I'm talking about bypassing even getting consensus from people below them and making a decision or putting some program in place without getting that consensus. And I remember one of the people below this top leader, I won't name any names, this said, maybe I should leave because obviously you don't need me. You've done these three things and you didn't consult me. They affect and impact my area. And the person, once they understood that, they said, oh, I'm so sorry, and they got better and didn't do that again, but they just wanted to go fast. They wanted to make the decision, and they didn't really think about outside of their bubble about who's impacted by this. And so that's a very I think any mature leadership system would have that, but it's definitely a hallmark of the Toyota leadership is getting consensus, understanding each other's ideas and questions and concerns before implementation. Doesn't mean everybody agrees, but it means everybody understands the impact and they support what's going to happen. And that took a while, and it's usually because they want to go fast, you know. And
Yeah.
end up obviously the old saying, "When I go fast, I go slow. When I go slow, I go fast."
Yeah, I don't know how many times I personally have learned that lesson is that as a I tend to be maybe a little more A-type personality leadership style than some others. I'm like kind of driven and let's go fast. And the number of times you're like you really do have to slow down to go fast. One of our previous guests shared a Japanese term. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but the definition was something like preparing the soil to. I don't know if that
Yeah,
concept.
Nemawashi.
Nemawashi, that was it.
Yeah, Nemawashi.
Yeah, that was a new term that I liked, and I thought that was such a good concept to, to describe what you need to do. You really do need to do that when change is, if you want to make change, to prepare the environment, not just command the change.
Right.
That's
And
good.
I love that term as well. And I use it a lot in my teaching in order to show an example of how sometimes we take a word like that is very important in the Toyota way, and we do a quick translation. So it's mean,
Yeah.
oh, buy-in. So, oh, we need to get buy-in from people. Okay, good. Let's get buy-in. Well, when you think deeper, you go into actually we're preparing the soil. And so if you have maybe in the Western world, if an idea if you're preparing the soil for transplant, is what we're doing. We're transplanting something from one spot to another. So an idea from my head into this spot where all of us are understanding what it is, and we can nurture this idea to grow. And if we use that analogy and we think about maybe in a Western type setting, we might plant 100 trees and expect 99 of them to die. And maybe the one healthy, one lives through some force of nature, it lives. And we celebrated and was, yes, that was a good idea. But what happened to the other 99? So every time that we have this new plant, this new tree, if it's an idea and we squash it, we kill it without giving it a chance, then that's 99 layers of cynicism we've just sown throughout the organization. So the Toyota way and somewhat the Japanese way is to take that idea and it's a sacred thing. We want to nurture it and give it a chance to live. So we take the time to prepare and get information, get not just buy-in, but we want people to contribute to that idea to make it theirs as well. So how would you improve this idea? How would you improve this process? How would you make and then take it to someone else and say, here's what Keith said, how would you add to that? And then around and around we go through this Nemawashi process. And we have something now that we all own, not just one person. Then it has a chance to actually live. So that's kind of a long response to that, but I love it, and it's indicative of several words, phrases that we have in Japanese that we quick and easy translate into English, and we miss the meaning of it.
I think that's so interesting. In this discipline, there's a lot of conversation about, things like, do you use the Japanese words? And some people say, oh, it doesn't really matter what word you use. And I agree that it doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, if you're speaking Spanish, you're going to use Spanish language. If you're speaking, English, you use English language. But I think it's interesting to pause on some of these concepts because let's just take the word respect. I could ask anybody on the street what respect means, but how does Toyota or the Toyota Way, what does respect mean in the Toyota Way versus maybe just, an average person off the street's definition of respect?
Yeah. It's an interesting way to interesting word to choose for that, but again, I teach on this a lot. So one of the ways, the surface level that we may see respect is being nice and polite to someone, which is good. We want that. That's a great thing to be. So two ways it really plays out in a Toyota setting. So one, if we use making a car as the work, and again, you know, whatever your industry you're in, you may be making something. I worked in a mortgage company once. We were doing projects, and they made decisions. They were trying to make a high quality, low cost, short lead time decision. So anything that you're making. So let's say we're making a car, and so work design is one example of respect. If we design the work in a way where people can do the work in a flow and they have what they need when they need it, the amount they need it, and they can do a cycle of work without interruption with high safety standards, we say we're respecting that person by giving them this value added work that they can do without stopping for their cycle. You know, that's one way it looks, maybe different than the outside. Some people say, "Oh, you're working me too hard." Well, if you're working too hard, that's also not lean. We want to have jobs that people can do over time and not have safety consequences. Another part of respect, and I experience this a lot, where you create your idea, your A3, you're working through, and you take it to your supervisor, your sensei, and if they look at that and just say, "Yep, okay, give it back to you. So there's two possibilities. One, you're perfect. Probably not.
Probably not.
Two, they don't care. So in those situations, the respectful thing as a leader is to look at that and provide feedback. And it's ongoing feedback over time. And so you can imagine some A3 that's marked up every time in red or whatever color they want to use, red, and back to you again, and you fix it, back to you again, and you fix it, back to you again. And it's painful, but it means that they respect you and they want to help you develop. And then at the end, you have this problem solved, and everybody feels good. But it doesn't always feel good in the moment. Sometimes it feels a little tough. And so that's maybe a difference that sometimes we, in a Toyota sense, that is respect. Outside, it may be seen, I don't know, this is a harsh word, but abuse. Some people may feel abused because they had to go back and rework this thing so many times.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting. I resonate quite a bit. Personal values, respect is one that's high importance for me, and I feel to use another Japanese term, the was it the shu ha ri kind of comes to mind, where it's really easy to learn respect, but then like the deeper you get into it, the more layers there are on this thing, and the more ways it can kind of give you feedback. You think you've got the skill mastered, and like nothing like being humbled around something you thought you knew how to do, which to me feels like every week in leadership there's something I thought I was great at that nope, I've got some things I could do better there for sure.
Yeah, that's our
Yeah.
chance to grow.
Yeah. How are there any best practices that you consult on now, or can share for either sharing that kind of like leadership feedback? How do you Nemawashi the environment to where the leaders you can have those conversations with leaders?
Yeah, it's changed for me a lot over the years. I think when I first left Toyota naively, actually, people say, a lot of my Toyota colleagues would say, "Oh, what's it like out there in the world?" And I would love to come out and do that. And I would always warn them. I said, this. I was very naive. I was maybe a little bit crazy to do this. I don't recommend it for anybody. I wouldn't change it for me because I had a good network and it just worked out. Very lucky approach to everything. So in that early time, I would take almost any client because I didn't know any better. Now that I'm in the position I'm in now, I've seen a lot of things, been a lot of places. I'm reluctant to work with companies, leaders that aren't ready at the very top to embrace change. If they're kind of delegating any transformation efforts down to specialist level or manager level, my experience has been it's really tough for them to be long-term successful in that. Even starting at the top sometimes it's not easy. So
Yeah.
now that's one of the reasons we really love working with family companies, because generally you can talk to first generation, second generation, third generation person who has a long-term vision for
Yeah.
that company. They want to see it last for another 50 years. And sometimes when you lose that in a public company, you're looking at the quarterly result, you're looking at the year-end result, making short-term decisions, that's tough. And so the best practice for transformation and really adopting it deeply the Toyota way or the lean way is that the leader sets that vision and they're committed to it. Imagine this in the book that's coming out pretty soon. I write about a scenario. So imagine this scenario that the Toyota presidency is vacant and they interview outside people. This would never happen, but just as a thought experiment, they interview outside people and they say, "Oh, we have TPS. It's been, the crux of our manufacturing success. We have the Toyota management system, which brings all of this together. We have the Toyota way, which is, our DNA basically. But what would you bring in to replace all that?" And it's absurd, but yet even sometimes in family companies it happens, but especially in other public companies, when the next leader comes in, they tend to kind of flush everything that happened and start over with their way and the way they've been successful, and they want to feel comfortable in what they're doing. So they get their team in, they get their way in, and it's just start and stop, start and stop. So you never get that continuity of, and that's one of the things that makes Toyota so successful. One of the things that's hidden a little bit below the surface is the continuity in leadership thinking. They're born and raised inside Toyota many times, and that dictates the growth of Toyota and the path of Toyota and the Toyota way itself. So yeah, that's a best practice, is very focused on leadership vision.
Are you struggling to ignite real change in your continuous improvement program? Firestarter is your field guide. Real stories, proven strategies, no fluff. Get it now on Amazon. You know, a lot of companies will have a continuous improvement department or function with directors and vice presidents or an operational excellence. And I've heard some people say, well, Toyota doesn't have a central function for continuous improvement because it's just what everybody does. And I'm wondering what your perspective is on that. Like, did they have a keeper of the flame that kind of drove that, or was it truly just something that was part of everybody's role?
If I, it depends on your level in the organization is part of that. So as a team member on the line, any front facing person like that, you're constantly going to be looking for waste and how to pull waste out of the process. And then sometimes there's opportunities for you to do Kaizen through QC circle activity, but a lot of times you get support from other functions, whether it be maintenance or your team leader, that kind of thing. So we expected everyone to do waste identification
Hmm.
and help with waste elimination. So that was a basic training. Everybody got about 7 waste, and it wasn't 8 waste, and that's a whole nother topic, the 7 waste that we looked at. But in Kentucky, we did have a smooth motion Kaizen team, for example, that worked on trouble spots throughout the plant. It was a rotational position, so you might get assigned to the smooth motion Kaizen team for 2 years, for example. It was also a flexible labor team, so sometimes on especially Fridays, you're probably gonna be back working somewhere in the on the line somewhere
Yeah.
or in some other function just to keep flexibility for labor. Sometimes Mondays as well. But in those other days, you're focused on some hotspots in the plant to there's maybe some issues with ergonomics, maybe there's issues with flow, maybe there's issues with parts. And so that was a function they had. I'm not sure what it looks like, today, but it wasn't the only people that were responsible. And OMDD was the keeper of the flame to make sure that, there were opportunities to learn, continue to learn and grow people around TPS. And there's another term called Jishiken activities that they also took care of. And Jishiken just translates into volunteer Kaizen activity. It's not sexy kind of. I was really looking for some kind of sexy name to attach to that, but there's not. It's just volunteer activity. But that was used for leadership to learn more deeply about TPS. And OMDD did that training. So they were,
Makes sense.
again, from my perspective, the keepers of the flame.
So I'm probably coming at this from the perspective of I'm an advocate of having, if something is important to you, you should make capacity for it, right? You should have some resources for it. And so maybe Toyota is the overly mature version of this, but let's say you're working with a consulting client who has 5 or 6 locations and they have some exposure to lean, like everybody's at least heard of it. Would you prefer to see somebody with some sort of centralized function to facilitate this kind of thing? Because at some level, like you certainly want to have a CEO that's bought in, but CEO's got a lot of responsibilities. He can't be the primary owner. He's got to share that responsibility. Do you have any, I don't know, recommendations? It's probably a it depends kind of thing, but what are some maybe milestones in that journey of when do you go from having one person that accidentally walked into a greenbelt class to having like a full department?
Yeah. So again, I think you hit on it. It's kind of depends situation, but you got to build capability and skill in an organization in order to be able to do it. And so you have to either do that externally through some training and development to start that path. Ideal state is that you do it internally with help to build capability through doing workplace projects, through creating model lines that eventually would go and encompass the whole plant. You can't just keep a model line and have that as being your own lean area. It won't get you what you want for that. And so if we look at Toyota's example, so let's say we're starting a new plant. in North America for the first time in Kentucky. There were an army of coordinators and trainers that came from Japan. Everybody, every manager, every group leader had a hip to hip person right there with them every day, co-leading, co-managing that effort. It helped Toyota Kentucky get started and they were successful, but it's not sustainable. And this may be a shocking way to put it for some people, but that failed. Toyota failed in that startup effort because once the they realized it's not sustainable, the trainers rotated out back home. There was, now you're starting other plants around the world. You just don't have as many people. And then we started to see a decline in the level of productivity and quality and safety and all these other indicators. Is, for example, in Kentucky. And that's the point where where Toyota globally said, the way we did it's not sustainable, hip to hip. And then there's a lot of issues with hip to hip because each person is going to have each trainer is going to have a slightly different way to explain things. The way they were trained, their sensei was different than the other guy's sensei. And so the kings and queens of standardization, Toyota, didn't have a standard way to do this.
Interesting.
And once those individuals went back to Japan and we went from 300 trainers to 20, things started happening. Indicators started going down. So then the decision was made globally. We have to have some curriculum that we can share around the world to make sure that we can get everybody at a higher level. We'll never create a whole global workforce of these Taichi Onos or Obas or these master senseis. It's never going to happen. But if we can extract knowledge from them and put that into a form of curriculum and programs that will help us raise everybody up, we can be better and we can sustain that and improve it. So that's when you had things like the project I was blessed to work on, the Toyota Way 2001 in Kentucky. That's when you have things like Floor Management Development System, FMDS, the global standardization of Hoshin Kanri. There was a few other programs fundamental skills training for every department in Toyota for manufacturing. And again, we could probably spend 30 minutes talking about that, but getting it to where we had a standard way of doing these things globally allowed everybody to get better. And I think that's something that people don't understand because we still have a lot of situations where people try to replicate Toyota based on old thinking of, oh, it's the sensei and
Interesting.
the sensei comes in and bashes people and then they go away and they bash again. What allowed Toyota to sustain some of those things was a global standardization of curriculum that can then be improved over time. So you had standard trainings that everybody goes into. So one outcome of that, let's say I'm a leader in Kentucky and there's an opportunity for me to transfer to another plant in the US or transfer to another plant in the world to learn and grow. Well, maybe I don't know the language so well, but if I know how our systems are set up and our FMDS, our floor management development system has a series of visual management templates, I know those. I know the Toyota business practice problem solving process, and I can immediately or very quickly grasp the current situation based on this template, and I can also more quickly coach.
Yeah.
Because we all have the same language around problem solving, around the Toyota business practice. And if we don't, then everybody's got their own way. Even if it's slightly different, I've got to learn what it is. I've got to learn the new systems and I can't contribute. I've got to take all this time to learn. Even worse than that, I don't take any time to learn and I just do it my way. So now I've got 11 ways instead of 10 ways, instead of 9 ways, instead of 8 ways. So kind of a long answer there, but it's that failure of that hip to hip method, and then the realization that we have to standardize programs and curriculum around the world was a huge step for Toyota.
Well, Darren, this has been a great conversation. I do have a few more. I call these the rapid fire questions. These are just kind of shorter questions, top of mind answers, word or phrase sort of thing. The most important job of a leader is to blank.
Create a vision for the organization, for their team, regardless of what level they are.
We know that lean isn't all about the tools necessarily, but is there a tool that you find yourself turning to, or would you say is your go-to?
Well, the most important part is creating flow. So understanding your Kanban. I have a whole thing about Kanban, but pet peeve about that. But creating flow will help you first understand where the problems are.
What are the books that you want to share with us as recommendations? Feel free to plug your own as well.
Well, we do have one book called Toyota by Toyota. It's been out for a while. A lot of my colleagues and I wrote that about 10 years ago. Another book coming out within the next month or so is called Courage, Humility, Kaizen. It's the disciplines that drive the Toyota way, written with my sensei Hiro Yoshiki as well. Hopefully, that's going to be a good book. I don't know. You guys will have to tell me if it's any good or not. I'm too close to it to know. And of course, another friend of mine wrote a book with Dr. Leiker called Toyota Culture. Mike Kozeas wrote with Dr. Leiker, and it really gives great insight into trying to create mutual prosperity in a company and a lot of details on hiring and all those things that you mentioned earlier. But yeah, that's kind of my go-to. One more, if you really want to understand those contradictions that drive Toyota, there's a book called Extreme Toyota. And I use that a lot for my own learning and use it a lot for my last keynote that I did for the contradictions that and paradoxes that drive Toyota.
Those are great. I always love a good book recommendation. Another, finish this sentence. Continuous improvement is.
Continuous.
Okay, that's a good one. Okay. Do you have a favorite question that you like to use in your practice that you turn to quite often?
Yeah, it's probably it should be the main question for all lean leaders and people. Is what problem are you trying to solve?
Brilliant.
What's the gap?
Yeah, that's a good one. Tell me something that you're fired up, excited about, looking forward to.
Well, the future for me, again, kind of not being involved as much in day-to-day consulting, moving more into writing, more into, being open to more keynotes and those kind of things, sharing this message to a broader audience, that excites me still.
AI is something that everybody's talking about, everybody's worried about. Do you have any thoughts or predictions on how this, continuous improvement, business improvement, discipline, the future of this with AI? Any predictions or thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I do think about it a lot. I have in my head what the future might look like when you combine robotics with AI and machine learning, and that the the way we set up factories, the way we set up making things, and a lot of times they call in consultants like us to redesign those things. I think that will go away. I think the design work will be done, by math. What's the flow we need today? And you can even change, set up, within the day with a combination of those things. I can see that future, but also know that AI won't replace the relationship side. As long as people are still working in businesses and companies, it's still going to be making that connection with individuals and being able to create vision for the organization. So I see it as working together with us, with people,
Yeah.
and the companies that are going to try really hard to replace everyone with robots and AI will probably pave the path for people to say that's not the way. And there's a hybrid way. There's a way that we can work together with this. So yeah, I think things will change dramatically. And yeah,
Yeah, you mentioned something just a minute ago. Made a little note I wanted to come back on. You said, something about regrets, or it's a shame when a transformation office, new leader comes in and then all the hard work that you put in, kind of gets thrown out. Are there some things that somebody leading a transformation office, a continuous improvement function, that they should be diligent about doing because the pattern that I've seen and heard of is, a new CFO comes in and they called the transformation office in and said, "What have you done for us? And why is this cost center sitting here on our, on our financials?" Are there some, I don't know, best practices on how to be prepared or ready or avoid that conversation?
Well, it comes down to communication, which is again another one of those things that AI will have a hard time replacing with us. And the idea of being able to tell stories. So storytelling is going to become more and more a prominent skill that we need to have. And so we have to be able to tell the story of our contribution, and not just on the numbers, the qualitative and the quantitative side of the contribution, and always have that story ready to go. We can't just build it at the end. We build our story and our understanding of how we're contributing, the things we've learned, and the things we've done well, the things we haven't done so well, to be able to express that to whoever that next leader is, to make it an obvious thing for them. And so it's that communication element. And
I really have enjoyed our conversation here. You've shared some really great stories and some great wisdom, and I hope to keep in touch with you and hear more about this interesting stuff. I love your Japan study stories too. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the guest, a website or a way to get in touch with you?
well, Honcha.org, our company website. There is a website, darrillwilburn.com, that just talks a little bit more about some of the things that I do. So you're more than welcome to go there and reach out about the Japan study mission. I haven't updated that with the new book information. The new book right now is actually in the hands of TMC, Toyota Motor Corporation. They're doing a review to make sure we're kosher.
Yeah,
Since Hero is at such a high level in the organization, it's kind of an agreement even after retirement that they have to take a look.
to look it over.
So once they get ready, finish taking a look at that, then that'll be out, and I'll update the website with the information about the new book. But also LinkedIn, of course. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn as well.
Darril, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I'm really happy to meet with you and get a chance to have you on the podcast and share some great wisdom and stories and wonderful experience.
Yeah,
Really
thank you
appreciate
so much. It's good to see you, Keith.
it. You bet. For our listeners, if you'd like to suggest a guest, ask a question, or give us any ideas for episodes or content, you are welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Keith C. Norris. And this concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to add a comment. You can like, follow, subscribe on the socials. Share the podcast with friends and colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are, or the ones that you hope would be. And you can find it wherever you get the podcast. Until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change. This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com.